Hello, thanks for joining us. If you're just getting here now, we're doing an author chat, and my name is Fiona Riley, and I'm with Lyn Hemphill and Nance Sparks. Without any more ado, why don't we get started? So like I said, my name is Fiona Riley, and I write contemporary lesbian romance. And we're all here this week and talking about books that we have coming out and kind of some of the adventures we're having. I live in Boston. Most of my stories take place in the city. Sometimes they leave, but they often come back here. Boston for me is very much a character. And I write like kind of a higher heat quotient romance, so a little steamier stuff. And this is not my first author chat. I've done these quite a bit. So if you've seen me before, you know how we try to make this a little more fun and a little more relaxed. So I want to introduce you to some newer authors. And why don't we start with you, Lyn? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Lyn, and I'm a British Kenyan author. So in other words, I was originally completely Kenyan and then recently got my second Chinese passport, and now I can travel to more places. And then the pandemic hit, and so that was bad. So I have written my first book for Boldstroke, which is Not Broken, which is a romance between a cis woman and a trans man, and involves her falling in love with this man while she's pregnant with her ex's baby. So it's a fun dive into gender politics and particularly sarcastic characters. So but I tend to write a bunch of different genres, and my next project is going to be involving magic. So as long as it's got romance in it, I'm happy. Queer romance in it, and it's great. But I do tend to genre hop a little bit.
That's great. Awesome. And what about you, Nance? Tell us about you.
I'm Nance Sparks. I live in Wisconsin with my wife, who's also Nancy, which is a big joke around here. We're just called the Nancys. So I write contemporary romance. I am dipping my toe into the action thriller for my third contracted work, but the first two are full-on contemporary romance. And I'm with you, Fiona. I like a little steam, so well,
keep it hot. I like it.
Much. Yes,
that's good. You know, it's important to have something that you like to stick to. I like to keep it. I like to make you sweat. So hopefully I do in the best possible way.
Exactly.
So now these are both the books we're going to talk about this weekend are both your first books with Bold Strokes, correct?
Correct.
How was it writing your first book? What was that process like?
For me, it was here. We'll just do here's my first one. It was so much fun to get the box, I will say that. But I actually wrote this book about 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it sat in a folder on my OneDrive forever. And I had knee replacement surgery this last year, and on a fluke, pulled it out. I had written another one a year before and sent them both into Boldstrokes, and they picked up Cowgirl. So that was just unbelievable, and it was just such a fun thing to bring this to life, especially having cared about these characters for so long.
Now, have you been writing a long time? Have you done a lot of things like that, Nance? Do you have many pieces on your laptop? I want to know.
I have probably like 6 novels on my laptop. They all need a lot of love and care, I found out, which is a great learning process, but I have 6 of them that are not full-length novels that I just need to now bring back to life and clean up and put in the right point of view and all that fun stuff. So
wow.
Yeah,
that's cool. What about you, Lyn?
So I have written a couple of other books that I self-published, because my theory of it was, if I don't stop this now, it's going to keep on going. So I wanted to be like, right, now I can justify buying more notebooks because I published this and it's fine. And it was a bit of a random chance that I found out about Boldstrokes because my friend took me to my first ever Pride, because, you know, growing up in a little bit of a homophobic country, and then having children quite quickly when I arrived in the UK, I had never been to Pride. So I went to my first one before lockdown. I don't remember when. I think it was 2019 or something like that. And I met the Bold Strokes people at the tent there and got chatting to Ileandra Young. And she was like, when we were just having a discussion, she was like, "Oh, send your stuff in, send your stuff in." So I did, and expected nothing more to come of it, and was just planning to go on with my life, And they sent me an email back, and they were like, "Yes, we want to write. You can publish this with us. This time, come along." So,
isn't that that's the best email to get?
My
gosh,
God, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I was like, I had to take it to people and say, is this, am I hallucinating this?
Is this authentic? Someone authenticate this.
Am I being punked?
Yes, exactly.
Well, there's something about it's so validating when we have these stories that take over our heads and our minds for months or years or decades in Nance's case, and get put aside, and we get to think that someone would be interested in reading them and seeing them. That's such a vulnerable thing to do, but also such a rewarding thing to think that, you have something that people might want to read, the world wants to see. And then it's a little scary once it gets out there. Have you experienced the scary yet?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. To be fair, I'm quite, I suppose maybe I've had a little bit of an easing into that, because I do write fan fiction. So that I have like entire novel length stories online, which are, I absolutely love the feedback you get from people with that, because you can get immediate, somebody sort of says, "Oh, this thing doesn't happen in this country, so there's your entire plot point fallen down there." And on the other hand, you get people saying, "Oh, this is really like validating that I'm really glad you wrote this," and stuff like that. It's a great community, and I'm very nervous about sort of taking that next step into sort of traditional publishing, and sort of seeing like there's that bit more of a disconnect between the readers of traditional fiction. So, but yeah.
Had you any experience with fan fiction, Nance?
Not until I had already signed my contract, and I went onto a Facebook group. It's this little campfire group, and it's all lesbians, and they kept talking about flashfic, fanfic, and I finally went and looked it up, and it was such a whole subculture I just didn't even know existed.
It is.
Nance, you did everything backwards.
Yes, I did. I did everything backwards. Welcome to my world.
And Lyn, do you still actively write fanfic, or have you stepped away from it?
I do, yeah, I do. Whenever I get the opportunity. At the moment, work is just chasing me like a mad beast behind me. But yeah, I do regularly write fanfic as well, and I think it's a fantastic culture, because it's obviously you do get there is a lot of attitude about it that people will be only, it's teenage stuff that's being chucked out, and yeah, of course some of it is, and I really embrace that, because these teenagers who are writing stuff that's sort of clunky and paragraphs are all over the place and it's all a bit weird, they're going to be writing in a few years' time, they're going to be producing the books that I want to read in the future. And I learnt more about consent from reading fanfic than I did from 36 years of anything else. And
we talked about this yesterday a little bit in a panel with Radcliffe. I was on a panel about size, the question I know you want to ask about is, am I a size queen? And the short answer is yes. But we were talking about lengths of novels or novellas or stories and how to get, and we talked about the epicness of fan fiction and how it can be 250,000, 300,000 words. And the interesting thing that I found, Nance, I found fan fiction kind of earlier, but I had also already written a novel. And then I had found fan fiction and went back. For me, the interesting thing about it, and what I have to say I agree with Lyn, is that it really exposes a lot of people to writing. There's some challenges, because obviously fan fiction is based on already established characters. So characterization is sometimes forgotten, because those characters already exist in the world, and you're more just exploring other stories that already involve them. And of course, then there's always the issue of craft, which, Nance, I think we can agree on. When we write our stuff 2015, I wrote my books 10 years ago and came back to them. The craft has changed, or my ability to know things different. So I embrace people writing fanfics. I think it's an important place to teach people to love writing. But there's certainly a lot of stuff that, published works and things like that are definitely, I think you hit the tune.
such a different it's a total different genre, because I mean, yeah, you don't have to create the characters from the ground up, but there's, especially when you look at the really, really good, incredible stuff, these people have to, you know, understand the characters that already exist, so they're all sharing these same characters and these same archetypes, and sort of writing about people that sort of exist in the shared consciousness, and making sure that they keep their story in character. And so you'll get a lot of people sort of being very careful about, oh, you know, I'm not sure that this character would do that, and yeah, no, I'm not sure that this character would say this sort of thing, and then but it's a great way to improve, that's for sure. So
it's a good way to start.
Different, because character creation is then a completely separate skill as well.
And it's, you know, one that takes a lot of time. So what do you think,
yeah.
Nance, looking back at your old writing, do you think you would tweak it and kind of clean it up, or do you think that you'd want to start over? Because I can tell you, I've written and come back to 5 or 6 years later. I'm not at the 20-year mark yet, Nance, but I've been like, it might be easier to write a book from scratch than to go back and patchwork something I've done before that wasn't as polished. What do you think? Are you ready to take it on?
Well, I will say that Cowgirl, I had to tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak, and thank God for Vic. But the one that I'm submitting a proposal for now is also one of those from eons ago, and that one I'm using it almost as a template or a idea post, but I'm starting from scratch. I've actually even renamed the characters so that I don't draw on the old work. I just think about the suspense of it, the whodunit, all the fun of it, but not rely on it and then have to tweak and tweak and tweak. So I you know, I certainly have it in the folder and it's got the same title, but it will be a completely different piece when I'm done with it this next time.
I think it happens. I think that's normal. I mean, especially if, you know, times change. And then we change as writers. Every book you get a little bit better. I know you guys, this is your first one coming out, but you've already had 2 or 3 in the works. You got more coming down. They come up pretty fast after the first one.
Yeah, they really
so don't they?
Yes. I have one coming out in November already. Again, you know, it's like, so it
feels like a lifetime.
I'm trying to finish one that's supposed to come out in February, and at the moment, like, okay, I am in that exact stage. I think that I am desperately trying to twiddle with it and edit it. Whereas there's a part of me that goes, just start from scratch and write it again. But you know, because it's
hard to throw away the words, so it really is difficult to take and go, you know, I've got 70,000 words. I'm going to scrap.
Yeah. Oh, you know? God, it's so painful. I do actually. That is why I write by hand. My first drafts usually are written by hand, not all of them. But then that forces me to discard that first draft, because I can't immediately transfer the whole thing onto computer. And the draft that I've got, not broken, changed a bit, but the one that I'm working on now, the Willing, is changing a lot in the transfer over. But it is painful to scrap that huge swathes of work.
Yeah.
And do you handwrite or do you type things up?
I type and I do versions by date. So I'll type and then I'll decide to go down a little bit different path. So I'll save a new version. And then go down that path and then save a new version. I've seen the different tools that a lot of authors use, a Scriber and different things, but I can't wrap my head around it. And I'm IT. I'm an IT person, and I just cannot wrap my head around that tool. So I just use my Word documents and do my versions by date. And
I'm so glad you said that, because I've never tried Scrivener, and loads of people say, "Oh, it's to die for," and I'm just like, "But Word. It's there."
Word. I even loaded the tool and the Scrivener. I loaded it and tried to import a document and looked at it and went, "Oh, it's too much. It's just too much. I can't." So Word.
Yeah. I think there's too many options on. For me personally, I think there's too many options on it. But I do know people who love it and swear by it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know,
I just
go for it, whatever your process is.
Yeah,
but not much.
My handwriting is terrible. So I
Yep,
don't write
mine
anything
too.
down. I do type everything, but I also I keep one document the whole way through. So I commit to an idea and run with it. So
Perfect. You
That
rock.
is great. That's great.
honestly, I think it's laziness and the inability to juggle multiple files. I'm going to be honest with you. But I mean, if you want to applaud me for that, thank you. But thank you, I'll take that. So we have got a couple of side questions before I lose them in the chat. I want to make sure we go over them. So the first question was, and this is a good question for both of you who this is your first book that we're going over today. The question was from Michelle. Hey, Michelle, how are you? And it says, how do you know when your first book is ready to submit for its first consideration over constant editing? So when do you pull the trigger and send it off? When did you guys decide you're going to send it into BSB? And then we'll talk about why BSB next.
I'll launch off on this one. I pulled the trigger and sent it in when I had read it so many times that I could probably read it to you without looking at the text. So at that point, I just pulled the trigger and said, I can edit for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
You need to just submit it and get a yay or a nay or a, oh my God, hell no, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, at some point you just have, and even now I find it easier as I wrote the next, because the second one that's coming out, I actually wrote from scratch. That's a brand new idea. And that one, it was much easier to pull the trigger, send it in, done. So I think it gets easier as you get more comfortable with the process, knowing all of the stages of the editing process. So
what about you, Lyn?
I think there's no set time for when it is done. I think we could theoretically work on it forever, and it would change constantly. And I think it when it gets to the point where I want to scream if I change another thing, then I think that's about time that it needs to stop now. But actually, I think that the system we've got in-house with sending proposals about books that we want to write, that's a very interesting situation, which is also a little bit scary, because it's almost like it's sort of like, okay, this is what I'm going to write and it's going to do this thing. And I'm just like, I know myself, my books are not going to do what I want to do.
So that's an interesting point. So Michelle, from my perspective, I submitted Mismatch was my first novel. And when I put that one out, I had 3 full-length novels written. I was kind of in the Nance bracket. And I had decided, I'd gone over it. It took me about a year to go over the whole thing and just kind of individually learn a little bit of craft, because again, I had some schooling on fan fiction, which is important to nurture, but it's also not great for polishing. And I had to learn a lot of stuff. And when I submitted it, it's the same point as Nance said. I was at nauseum. I was like, if I read this one more time, and then the thing is if you stop reading it and you just know what's going to happen, and then you start making mistakes because you miss over things, right? Like, the next 6 words, you wrote them 85,000 times. So for me, it was a matter of, making the proposal and walking away from it for 4 or 5 days, coming back, looking at the proposal and making the decision to send it in. And then that's where, once that's gone, it's out of your hands, then it's, there's a relief that comes with it, and then its own anxiety. But mostly I think it's a relief to have it out, and then whatever happens with it at that point, other people help to have influence on. So the other point that kind of came from this, the question that we had in the chat box is, what made you choose BSB over other publishers? What did you expect when you sent your manuscript off to them? What was it like, getting that email back, and what made you choose them in the first place?
Well, as I was saying earlier, I'm much older than you two, because we discussed children and my elderly already. But I have followed BSB since inception. I have followed the authors. I have followed, and to me that there was no other go-to. So BSB was my first choice. And then if it was a no, I would look at other publishers. But really, BSB was the only place I sent those 2 manuscripts to, and that was it. So
what about you, Lyn?
I've been sending manuscripts on and off for about 10 years, so to all sorts of places, and with a couple of books. One of them was not a queer romance, and one of them was not a romance at all. It was a coming of age story, and so I suppose I was just looking, I was sort of sending them as many places I could. And then as I said, I met Ileandra Young in Pride, and she had everything good to say about BSB, like that it was sort of really, really friendly and sort of author run and stuff like that. And it was just, when I sent it and deliberately didn't get my hopes up, because when you've sent it, like you said, you have nothing more that you can do about it. So I just sent it and was like, right, that's it. I'm on to the next thing. And I refused to think about it. And so when it did come up, when I did get the email back, I was like, holy shit. What now? It actually happened. That's the thing that happens in movies.
For me, I actually didn't find lesfic until after college. So I went to med school. So I was doing a lot of medical learning, and you find that you spend so much time reading that your eyes need a break. And I didn't do as much leisure reading as I used to do prior to school. So I didn't find my first lesbic book. I have these 3 of them. I got all 3 of them at the Borders before Borders closed, at the discount box.
Yeah.
And I have them next to me, and I'll never get rid of them. And it was my first introduction to lesfic. And one of them was Megan O'Brien, which is right there, 13 Hours. And then it was Desire by Starlight, which is Radcliffe. And those books just completely changed my view of writing and reading, because all of a sudden I had an avenue to find something that looked like me, or someone that had a happy ending, which I was always searching for, since it didn't seem to be present in media. And then about that time was actually when I found fan fiction. So I had done a little bit writing on my own, but I hadn't really found an outlet for it. And for me, Bold Strokes was the first choice. It was the most established. I loved the quality of the books that came out. I went and checked out other publishers. I have other books from other publishers, and Bold Strokes for me was just, the gold standard. It's where I wanted to be, and it's where I wanted to learn from. And I think you'll find, and you'll I'm sure tell, it is a really community based. I have a great community of authors and friends, true friends, best friends that I've met through this writing community. And even during the pandemic, the best thing that's happened is having these online chats with people and doing these bookathons where I get to meet readers who I normally wouldn't see, like Lyn, who's in a completely different continent. Which
in one, and I'm from another.
There you go. So, and then like Nance said, like, we all have kids. I have really little kids. So the likelihood of me getting over to see Lyn with 2 very small children is very slim until they're much bigger, like Nance's kids, and then we can leave them. So for me, it's the community. I love the community. I'm so grateful to how the readers embrace the writing. I love the ability to tell these stories. I love the variety of stories. I love that we have so many, even in this conversation, the differences that we have coming through is so important. So love that. Love that for us. Very excited. Go publish your book, Michelle. Submit it in. Don't be afraid.
That's right.
You just got to pull the trigger, because you won't know until you try.
Exactly.
And then you just go.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got books in the past. You've all applied before. You're great. You have 1 book out. You can have another book coming out soon. The process to get started takes a while. It's like 18 months or so. It feels like forever. But now all of a sudden we have 100 books coming out all at once. Yes. Right, Nance?
Yep.
Right, Lyn?
That first book is a process. It is, and it's such a learning process. It really, and it's an incredible learning process, especially if you're open to absorbing every single thing you can.
Right. Absolutely. So now that you have books on the agenda, contracts signed, the most important question is, are you a plotter or a pantser? And how are you going to meet your deadline, ladies?
Oh, shit.
I haven't missed the deadline. So I have that going for me. I am a pantster at heart, working on being a plantster.
Ooh. Oh, I like that. Hybrid. That's good.
Hybrid, because there's some genre where if you're going to go down a certain road, you have got to have an idea of how you're going to keep your reader at the edge of their seat, and you have to have some mile markers. Mm-hmm. And my characters take on a life of their own. They always have, and sometimes I can't control them, and they'll just do what they want to do. But the idea is to have a game plan. Yeah. At least a pseudo outline.
What about you, Lyn?
Yeah, I am a plotter. I start off as a plotter, and then, like Nance said, they just take their own way. I mean, like, Max wasn't supposed to be the love interest in this book, and he was supposed to be the sort of there to like be a shoulder to cry on, and then he came out as trans, and then I realized that Rose was into him as well, and I'm just like, oh, come on, guys, I have to rewrite this plan. But yeah, it's sort of I do definitely plan to certain extents before I start writing. Sometimes I'll get to the point where I will almost always get to the point where I have an arc, and whether that's a character arc, or it's usually a character arc or a plot arc, before I actually start writing anything. But then there's other times where I'll plan and I'll be sort of trying to get all of my soldiers lined up or whatever it is, and then I realize that, oh god, this is driving me nuts. I'm just going to dive in and just going to write.
How about you?
So like I said before, I have two really little kids. So for me, writing has to happen in between my full-time job and my momming time. And they're little for a little time, so I want to spend as much time as I can with them. The pandemic has put us all together a lot of time. There's been a lot of time together. a lot of time. So honestly, I'm a plotter, and I think that all of us have to be pantsters at some point, because like you said, the characters take on their own personality. They go and do things that you don't approve of, and then you have to find a way to make that okay. But I absolutely plot my books out 100%. So Lyn had talked about in-house, we're looking for a new book proposal, submitting a proposal. My in-house proposals to Sandy, who's the person who takes our proposals, are very long, 6 or 7 pages. And I'm sure she hates that. And I love you, Sandy. But for me, it's a matter of mapping it out start to finish. And the reason I do that is because I don't have a ton of time to write. I can't sit in front of my laptop and think about the words before they get on the page. They have to get on the page. I have 2 hours here, 15 minutes here, 3 hours while they're napping. Everyone's asleep. It's 1 a.m.
I think you're going to have 2 hours, and it's like, mommy.
Right, exactly. So for me, I have to have a plan. It's really good to have an agenda. And then because of that, I very rarely get writer's block, because I know where I'm going. So it's like the mile markers you talked about, Nance, but for me, it's the mile markers fleshed out a bit. So no matter what I'm getting there might be a scene for like grocery shopping also that I throw in, but we're getting to that other piece for sure. And that's the only way that I can stay on target. But yeah, I know a lot of people don't do that, but yeah, 6 or 7 page proposals are my jam. And I don't plan to stop that. So, but I also don't handwrite things. So maybe that's why. Maybe if I handwrote stuff, I would be different.
I tend to handwrite things in certain situations. So it's again to do with children, because if I'm going out taking kids to the clubs and so on, I can't take tech a lot of the time. There's a lot of kids clubs where they won't allow you to be on your tech, like swimming pools, that kind of thing, because of photos and privacy and so on. So I will have a book there, and I'll be writing whilst my kids are doing their swimming lesson. And of course, then the pandemic happened. There are no groups. The children are always here. And we have a house.
And duct tape's illegal.
They have to be in this room with me doing their work. Maybe one of them sits under my desk to do her work. She's just like, I'm going to crawl under your desk to do my.
Well, that's a great segue to our next question. Somebody asked, how do you stay inspired? And my question is, how were you able to get inspired and stay inspired with the pandemic? So where do you find your inspiration? And in this particular instance, where were you able to cultivate your creativity in such a unique set of circumstances that aren't over yet? What do you think, Nance? Why don't you start?
Oh, okay. The pandemic was a little unusual for me because the pandemic started with a full knee replacement. So I kind of already had a couple stories in my head and just took advantage of the time recovering and passed that time by typing. And so I was blessed enough to say the pandemic didn't alter my life that much because I already was down and out. and isolated.
Mhm.
So, and my wife already worked from home, so we just had our little routine, and everything worked out well. As I healed, then, luckily there were stories in the hopper, and I was home to work on them. So,
What about you, Lyn?
I have to admit that I didn't do a huge amount of inspiration and a huge amount of writing during the pandemic because my work increased. I already worked online, but I teach for an online school. And so suddenly the students aren't able to do their international exams. We now have to find some way of assessing them and proving that they can go on to university and so on. So my life got very much busier, and it got to the point where I think that I prioritized my mental health and my work over my writing, and I'm getting back into it now. I'm sort of getting back into writing a bit more now, and it helped actually doing. I don't know if you guys know of Marian Keyes. She's an Irish author who writes a lot of sort of pet romance, but usually with an undercurrent of something a bit darker. And she ran an Instagram live sessions of just her talking to people and taking questions, and it was really helpful and just really sort of got me back into thinking about, got me enthusiastic, got me thinking I want to make time again, and I want to find some time to be me and not just to be like productivity.
Sure. Well, that's hard. That's the hardest part about the pandemic, right? Is now that we're all home, there's no workday end. It's not like 9 to 5 clock out. It's like it's 2 a.m. and I might as well check my emails because I'm home, right? So that's a really hard way to keep inspiration going. So personally, for me, my inspiration comes from the things I like most. So for me, it's I love being outside. I love the ocean. I love the feeling of falling in love. I've been with my partner for a long time. And I love that first 4 months, 5 months of puppy love idiocy where you make all the stupid mistakes, but you're just falling over each other. And I love the long-term love that comes after it, the one that builds a family, the one that takes you through, to the ends. But for me, that's what gets me excited. So little things like that. The spring brings out all kinds of new, awkward, romantic meet cutes for me. Like, that's how I have my inspiration for that. And during the pandemic, I needed that escape into a world that was lighter and had a happy ending that we knew was coming, and also one that I could help to escape into, because I think escapism is so important in a time like right now where we are still isolated and things are better than they were a year ago, but they're not right. And it's not normal yet. And so we're still a ways away. So for me, the inspiration comes from the little things that I see every day. The things that bring me joy are the things I usually write about. So this, for me, in this book that I wrote, that's coming out next month, May 1st, is Bet the Farm. And for me, Bet the Farm is a sequel, or it's a series extension from the first one, which was Bet Against Me. And it follows the same high stakes romance series that involves this high-end real estate office. So I was writing this book when the pandemic hit. And it was about leaving Boston and going up to a simpler place like up in Maine, which at the time seemed like a great thing to get away from. I live in a big city. So to get it to escape, that was 100% something I wanted to do when the pandemic hit. And no one was going anywhere. But that escapism was what inspired me to keep writing. I needed to have that happy ending. So I drew from those little things in my life to kind of inspire that. So I like it. It's good. What do you guys think about? Now, I know, Nan, you're talking about changing up. You guys both genre hop, which I don't. But I think, Nan, you told me you're thinking about doing something a little more thriller-based, like mystery-based. We got a question about that. Yes. Is it acceptable for you to have a few red herrings if they all wind up solving not only the main crime, but a couple of other along the way? I think this is a good question about side plots, subplots, things like that. What do you think as you're going into a new genre? How do you feel about loose ends? You sort of answered it a little bit by having a plotting pantser kind of approach, but what do you think about that?
I do love subplots. Absolutely love subplots. Mm-hmm. And I think I do like to try and make sure I read everything and tie up all the loose ends. I don't like to leave dangles unless it's teasing a sequel. Mm-hmm. Then absolutely, let's just string that carrot and have a lot of fun with that. So,
Lyn, it sounds like your subplot turned into the whole plot. So,
yes. Oh my God, yeah, it really did. I tend to, a lot of the time, my stories will tend to start off not romance, and they'll tend to start off with something else going on. Like in particular, this Not Broken was about sort of this girl who gets pregnant but knows that she never wants to be a mum, and she has never wanted to be a mum. And there's that whole like, I think you both will know about this, that whole attitude around women in general of, you'll understand when you have your child and that kind of thing, and you'll change your mind, and that sort of patronizing sort of internalized misogyny there. And it's basically as well the father in this particular story was desperate to have a child, and it was based on my friend who at the time was also very, very broody. Essentially, he really wanted to have children. He's always wanted to have children, and bless him, he's recently had a little boy. So yeah, it's that idea that women are expected to want children and men are expected to not want children, and I wanted to turn that on its head, and because I saw it happening so often, I think it should be much more accepted. And Max then came along and ended up changing Rose. So the point of Rose in this is that she doesn't change her mind. She doesn't want to be a mum. She agrees to carry the baby for Harley, but she doesn't want to be a mum, and she's not interested in making the relationship work for the baby. And but Max came along and he changed her, and then suddenly, of course, that became her character arc and her growth. And so yeah, and Max is lovely. So.
The side characters and the subplots help make the story, and I think if people if you don't give them the credit that they're due, I mean, the story's going to fall flat. I think it's important to have supportive friends. It's important to have something that happens in the story to help move the internal dialogue, or the slap you in the face moment, like, how could you do that? Like, what were you thinking letting her go? I think those things, like, you need that, like, reminder, maybe a best friend, or maybe a girls' night, or whatever the case, or an animal. I have a lot of people who have animals. They talk to their pets, like, whatever it is, that stuff's important. It's really important to have side parts and subplots. And I don't think it's specifically about, the question was specifically about, mystery or thrillers. I don't write those, but I will tell you that I find that the more I nourish the side characters and the subplots and make it feel more real, then I think the stories are always better. And then also, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I just think it's it's such a difficult balance, finding that balance between the side characters have to have their own lives, they have to have their own agendas, and they have to, like, oh, you're writing this, and suddenly, oh, but hold on, this person was just saying that they were going to Italy. Why are they here telling this character to do something? You've got to really remember all of these characters and what they're doing. And I think that really respecting them, like you said, is giving them the respect that they're due is so important, because that way you'll know if the character would say something like that. I think it's so important.
I think what you said, Nance, is important too. If you do have a really rich side character, that's where you get your sequel. That's where you get your spinoff, right?
Yep.
And if you got to give them a little, stage time, and then hopefully that's where that comes from. And for me, that's what this book is. Bet the Farm is the best friend from the first book, the very supportive, quirky best friend, and now has her story. And you get to revisit, the best friend from the first book, and they have this little community. And I think that's how the best stories are written. Now, do you plan to write connected series, like, read in sequential, or just, a common world, multiple stories? Like, where are you both in that?
I like, some of my favorite stories are a standalone, and then a supporting character in that standalone goes on to find their happily ever after. And it's a different point of view, a different perspective, but it's the same town, and it still has all the same characters and the people you love and the moms and the whole thing. But the main characters, you've shifted perspectives. Now your supporting people are your main characters, or one of them is at least. And as long as their personality carries through, and then your old main characters become supporting characters in your new book. Those are my favorites, because they can stand alone. You don't have to read them sequentially, but you get a warm fuzzy because all of these people are back in your life and you missed them, and
Right.
you get to keep them on the journey. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. One of my favorite authors, Alice Oseman, she's got now the Oseman verse, because she writes her story about where her main character, then the brother of her main character becomes the main character in a series, and then the sort of the girl below her in class gets her main story, and they're all interconnected, and every now and again one of the others shows up, and I love that. I think because I don't want to revisit the same characters, because I've put them through enough.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We've run them through the ringer.
They're done with us.
They're like, give me a break.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I think there's something rewarding for the readers to have those little Easter egg reminders, right? Like they see their favorite character from a few books back. And I like to revisit them just to make sure that people know that the happy ever after is still happening.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a quick reference, like somebody put in the chat roll, Melissa Braden does this really well. She snuck in a robbery in one of her just a flash away on the TV screen on one of her more recent books, of one of her first books. It mentioned a character in a bank robbery or something on the screen, and it was something that you would have skimmed right over because it didn't matter. But if you've read the stories before, it was like that's so,
you're like,
like that was a gift, like that kind of thing's a gift. And, for me personally, every story I've written has had a drawback or a reach back. So for me, I like to I base most of my books in New England. So it's easy to do, but they pretty much always have a reference to character. I have a friend who did this, and this, and it's a book, character prior, but because I love them and I don't want to let them all go.
Right.
You fall in love with people.
They become part of our lives. These characters just still live within us, and sometimes they have more to say. But awesome. Not a whole book worth. They just need to have a little something.
Yes, and it's also to sort of it's sort of not falling into the trap that Marvel makes. You've wrapped up your story. You've given this character growth, and suddenly they're back to where they were before.
Yeah, I don't want them to backpedal.
Making sure you don't undermine what you've done before, and that you believe in what you've done before as well. So. Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have time for one or two more questions. So I guess for me, what I want to know is, do you write in order? Or, like I asked you in your email, are you a lunatic? So please, by all means, tell me, should I be concerned, or do you write in order?
I actually write in order, but I have done the lunatic and grabbed something that was in one part and went, no, this needs to happen much sooner, or it happened too soon. Let's move that out a little bit and put this in place. So I have done some rearranging, but I write in order.
Lynn, same.
Usually, if I by choice, I will write in order. But over the pandemic, I found when I found myself shorter on time because of children and work and so on, I've actually found that writing just the scene that's in my head at the time, just on a note in a notebook or something, that is very satisfying, because I'm always worried that it's going to run away if I don't write it down. And I know I don't have time to write the entire book up to that sort of the morning after and the cuddle and the walk they want to go down on the beach. But I want to write that scene now.
I do that on sticky notes. I have written sticky note scenes.
Sticky notes. I mean, honestly, we should all get sticky notes. Should be given to us like notebooks. For writers, should get unlimited supply of sticky notes, notebooks. There you go. Oh,
I have them in sequence
and multicolored. Look at that. I don't have that kind of organization. Yeah. I write in order because I put my book out to Sandy in order. I have moved a scene or two, but it's very infrequent. And even then, it's the scene that's already, I know what's going to happen. I just move it up so that it happens. I can't write out of order. I don't have the brain capacity personally, but I know Carson Tate does. I know Aurora Ray does. And I don't think I'm smart enough to do it. And I need a little bit more stability and discipline to keep me on task.
Well, I personally think those bits that I'm writing out of order are not going to end up in the final thing, because it's like with the the whole of Willing, which is the coming up book. That one, I have changed so much of that. It's basically just the core story that's the same now, and everything else has changed. So much of what I did write, even when I wrote it in order, is now gone. So I'm just sort of trying to let go and trying to relinquish a little bit of control by writing just the thing that is in my head right now, and being kind to myself as well, because I'm like, I really want to get to that part, but it's going to take 3 years to get to that part. So let's write it now.
Yeah.
And that's a great segue for our last question. So tell me, what's coming up now? Like, what's your next? So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Willing? Tell us more. What can we get excited about? Now that you're changing it every 5 seconds, but what's the idea of the Willing, and should I be excited about it?
Talia and Kitty are staying. They're going to do what they're told. So the Willing is about Kitty, who is I suppose a witch. She's a magic user who can bring people back from the dead as long as there's someone willing to take their place. Talia is a traumatized loner who's sort of essentially been kicked out of her home in Scotland, and now lives in Oxford and is attending university in Oxford. And they meet when Talia dies, and Kitty is tasked to bring her back to life. So.
Whoa, I'm very excited. I'm committed now. I'm committed. When is this book coming out? When can we get excited for it?
February 2022.
Awesome. Well, that's like tomorrow. It's no big deal. We're almost there. Hurry up and write the book.
Yes. This is the kind of enthusiasm I need.
All right, Nance. And now your book's coming out May 1st, Cowgirl, but you do have something else. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Cowgirl, and then tell us about what's coming out in November?
Well, Cowgirl is a couple of just wounded souls that need someone to love them. And they find each other by fluke and figure out how to communicate, how to open up, how to explore each other's worlds and share. And they just kind of pull each other out of their shells. So, it's just a fun, light, contemporary. Well, I won't say this one's light. This one's a little tough, but Alaskan Wedding, the next one is light. The next one it's sassy. Alaskan Wedding is sassy.
Oh, I like me some sass, Nance.
Oh, they are fun. I have 2 main characters. One of them is a bridesmaid, a maid of honor at a wedding in Alaska. The photographer was the maid of honor's high school sweetheart.
Ooh.
And they meet in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, 15 years after their relationship has ended, and rekindle things and go on this bubble adventure, because they still have a whole week to rediscover each other. And it's light and fun and whiskey and drag queens and just a blast.
My favorite things, my absolute favorite things.
I love all those things too. So yeah, so that one's fun. And then the one after will hopefully be the thriller, and I'm still plotting that one all out. So
excellent. Awesome. So I have Bet the Farm's coming out May 1st. And then the last book in the Common World series is Beginner's Bet. And for me, that'll be out in September. And that will be Ellison's story for those of you following along. First was Trina's, second was Lauren's, last one's Ellison's. And it was a joy to write. I absolutely loved it. I'm just finishing it now. And that's the story. So thank you so much for joining us for the author chat. There was plenty of stuff we didn't get to talk about, which we'll have to do another day, because ladies, I had a blast.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much fun.
Moderating and hosting.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Great.
Message your authors, tell them how much you love us, remind us, encourage us to write these stories. We're doing the best we can, and we really love what we do. So we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much, readers. Thank you, BSB, for the opportunity. And hopefully we'll see you guys soon in person. All right.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day, guys. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.